Hey everyone, so we all think we know the first stories in the Bible, right? Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. But what if we've been reading them all wrong? What if they were never meant to be a literal history book? Today, we're going to look at these ancient stories through a completely different lens, seeing them as a powerful, symbolic picture of humanity's very first great drama.
And that really is the central question we're diving into. Was the author trying to give us a straightforward historical account of the first families on Earth? Or was he crafting something more like a profound pictorial allegory about the very nature of human society itself? Honestly, the answer to that could totally change how you see these foundational stories.
So, our guide for this journey is a scholar named Milton Spenser Terry, and his whole argument was that these early chapters of Genesis are what he called an apocalypse, not the end of the world, but a symbolic revelation, a story designed to show us deep truths about who we are. Yeah, I know. When you hear the word apocalypse, your mind probably jumps to fire and brimstone, the end of all things. But in this older biblical sense, it just means an unveiling or a revelation. It's a way of writing that uses these big, powerful symbols and images to get at a much deeper message. So think of it less like a history textbook and way more like a profound piece of art. And where does it all kick off? Well, it starts with the very first brothers, Cain and Abel. And according to this symbolic reading, this isn't just some tragic family squabble. Nope. This is the symbolic starting point for two completely different ways of being human, two paths that are going to be in conflict for all of history. And get this, the symbolism is baked right into their names. Cain's name means something like acquirement or possession. His mother even says, "I have gotten a man." She's thrilled. He represents worldly power. But Abel? His name means vanity or breath, something fleeting, here one moment and gone the next. So right from the jump, we have this stark contrast between earthly strength and humble piety. So you see, when Cain kills Abel, it's way more than just the first murder. It's a picture of a conflict that's foundational to humanity. It's that moment where worldly ambition, raw jealousy, and pride just lash out and snuff out quiet righteousness. This single act really sets the stage for the two competing legacies that are going to shape the entire world to come. So what happens next? Cain gets exiled. He literally goes out from the presence of Jehovah. And from this point on, he and his descendants are going to build a world entirely on their own terms, a world defined by human achievement, by ambition, and by their own strength. And you know what? They are wildly successful at it. Cain's family line literally represents the birth of civilization. His descendants become the pioneers of herding livestock, they invent music and the arts, and they master technology, figuring out how to forge metals. I mean, these guys are the builders, the innovators, the absolute creators of culture. But there's always a catch, right? With all this amazing progress comes a really dark side. Building cities brings new temptations. The introduction of bigamy, taking multiple wives, points to a kind of moral decay. And that amazing new metalworking tech, yeah, it's not just for making plows, it's for making swords. The path of worldly achievement starts to spiral down into luxury, vice, and ultimately violence. And this all comes to a head with one of Cain's descendants, a guy named Lamech. This quote is basically his theme song, and it's savage. He's boasting about his own power to get revenge, making it way bigger than even the protection God gave Cain. It's the ultimate display of human pride and brutality, a total rejection of God's justice in favor of his own personal bloody vengeance. Okay, so that's the path of Cain. Now let's switch gears and look at the other path. After Abel is killed, Adam and Eve have another son, Seth, who is appointed to take his place. His family line is going to represent a completely different way of life. Not worldly achievement, but quiet, faithful devotion to God. Just look at this. Notice the rhythm here. It's powerful, but it's also so monotonous. It's almost hypnotic, isn't it? For generation after generation, the formula is exactly the same. A man lives, he has a son, he lives a bit longer, and then he died. There are no great inventions, no cities being built, no songs about vengeance. There is just this steady, predictable, quiet cycle of a pious life being passed down. And this just goes on and on for centuries. It's an incredible picture of faithfulness, but let's be honest, it's also incredibly predictable. Until, suddenly, one man breaks the cycle. And that man is Enoch. He represents the absolute pinnacle of this pious life. His relationship with God, his walk with God, is so deep, so intimate that he completely breaks the pattern. He doesn't die. The text just says he was not, for God took him. He literally transcends death, representing the ultimate reward for a life completely devoted to God.
Okay, hang on. Because this is the part where Terry's whole argument that this is a symbolic picture and not literal history gets really, really compelling. He points out this hidden pattern in the text that suggests this was all constructed very, very deliberately.
Just look at the names in the two family trees. I mean, is that a coincidence? It's uncanny. Both lines have a guy named Enoch and a guy named Lamech. Other names, like Arad and Jared, are incredibly similar. And get this, where they're different, the meanings are often polar opposites. Mehujael means smitten of God, while the similar-sounding Mahalalel means praise of God. Now, a historian would be totally baffled by this, but for a writer creating a symbolic story, this is an absolute masterstroke of parallel storytelling. And the two guys named Lamech, they're like perfect mirror opposites of each other. The Lamech from Cain's line is the violent, bragging polygamist. But the Lamech from Seth's line, he's the father of Noah, whose name means rest and comfort, the one who brings hope to a world under a curse. The author uses the very same name to show us the absolute worst of one path and the coming salvation of the other. All right, so we've got these two symbolic paths, right? One is all about worldly, violent progress. The other is all about quiet, predictable piety. They're running in parallel. But what happens when they finally stop running side by side and they actually intersect? Well, the result is nothing short of catastrophic. And that collision is captured in what is, honestly, one of the weirdest and most debated verses in the entire book of Genesis. But if you're reading it symbolically, like Terry suggests, the meaning suddenly becomes crystal clear. This isn't about angels marrying humans. It's about the two symbolic family lines we've been following finally merging into one. You see, the sons of God are the pious descendants of Seth, the ones who had the potential to be like Enoch and walk with God. And the daughters of men? That's the worldly, sensual line of Cain. So their union is the symbolic picture of the godly line completely abandoning its principles, seduced by worldly beauty and lust. That godlike potential gets prostituted, and the two separate streams just merge into one great, muddy river of corruption. And we're not talking about just a few bad apples here. The corruption was absolute, total. The two paths had blended so completely that the world's moral compass was just shattered. Every single thought, every impulse, the text says, was bent only toward evil all the time. And when you have a situation like that, the outcome is really inevitable, isn't it? Humanity's wickedness has hit 100%. And in response, the story portrays this profound divine grief and a need for judgment. The world that was created to be good is now fundamentally, irrevocably broken. And so we get the final verdict. The apocalypse of this first world, its symbolic unveiling, ends with a sentence. The whole experiment has led to universal depravity, and the only possible solution is a complete and total reset. The stage is now set for the Great Flood, not just as a historical event, but as the necessary cleansing of a symbolically corrupted world. So thinking about this whole story as a symbolic picture instead of just ancient history, it kind of leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? This ancient narrative paints a picture of two huge forces within humanity, that drive for worldly achievement, for power, for progress, and that other call towards piety, humility, and faith. What does this ancient story about their collision and the corruption that followed reveal about the very same tensions that are playing out right now in our civilizations, in our societies, and maybe even inside each of us today?